Picture this. It's Friday afternoon, and the work week is finally bleeding to a close. You're sitting in the driver's seat of your car, in the company parking lot. The engine is off. The silence in the cabin feels heavy. You pull out your phone and open your banking app. The little loading circle spins for a second, before revealing your checking account balance. Your paycheck just hit. The number on the screen is fine. In fact, it's exactly what you expected it to be. But instead of feeling a wave of relief, a familiar tightness grips the center of your chest. Your breathing gets a little shallower. You're staring at a screen. That tells you that you have money, but your brain is screaming that you're completely broke. You start doing the mental math that you've done 1,000 times before. You subtract the rent. You subtract the car payment. You subtract the credit card bill that never seems to actually go down. The number shrinks. But that's not what's actually scaring you. What scares you is the invisible monster, hiding just out of frame. You look at the remaining balance, and all you can see are the catastrophes, waiting to happen. What if the transmission in this very car decides to explode on the way home? What if that weird pain in your back turns out to be a medical emergency? What if your boss calls you into the office on Monday morning and tells you the company is downsizing? You sit there, in the parking lot, holding a phone that holds your lifeline, and you feel entirely out of control. It's a quiet, suffocating dread. You've worked 40 hours this week just to feel this exact same way again. The logical part of your brain tries to intervene. It tells you to take a deep breath. It tells you to transfer a few $100s into your savings account. It tells you to be responsible, but the panic is already steering the ship. The fear of losing everything makes the idea of locking money away in a savings account feel dangerous. If you put it away, you couldn't get it when the sky inevitably falls. So you decide to just leave it in checking. You tell yourself it's safer there. It's accessible. You can protect yourself if you need it. You're hoarding cash like a squirrel terrified of a winter that might never come. Then, something incredibly strange happens. You put the car in drive and leave the parking lot. You're stressed. You're anxious. The weight of financial ruin is sitting in the passenger seat. But instead of driving in straight home to eat leftovers, you pull into the drive-thru of an expensive coffee shop. Or maybe you stop at a big box store just to look around. You walk the aisles or wait in the line, feeling a strange mix of guilt and defiance. You pick up a $40 item you absolutely don't need. Maybe it's a new shirt. Maybe it's a fancy gadget. You walk to the register and you swipe your card. For exactly 3 seconds, as the machine beeps and the receipt prints, the anxiety completely vanishes. You bought something. You made a choice. You proved to yourself that you aren't entirely powerless. In a world where rent is skyrocketing and groceries cost a fortune, buying this small, meaningless item makes you feel like you're still in charge of your own life. You walk out to your car, holding a plastic bag, feeling a fleeting rush of dopamine. But by the time you turn the key in the ignition, the high is gone. The tightness in your chest comes rushing back, heavier than before. Now you've got less money, the exact same amount of fear, and a lingering sense of shame. You ask yourself why you just did that. You call yourself stupid. You promise yourself that next time, next paycheck, you do better. You drive home in silence. The cycle has completely reset. You're stuck in a loop that feels entirely unique to you. A quiet struggle that you'd never admit to your friends or family. You think you just have a spending problem. You think you just lack discipline. But you're completely missing the invisible force that's actually pulling the strings. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. The quiet shame of that silent drive home is something millions of people experience every single Friday. You beat yourself up, thinking you are the only one who can't seem to get this right. You look around at your coworkers, or your neighbors, and assume they have some secret instruction manual for life that you somehow missed. You assume they are naturally disciplined, while you are inherently flawed. But that is the first and biggest lie you need to stop believing right now. Living in this constant state of financial anxiety is completely exhausting. It isn't just the physical tiredness that comes from working long hours at a demanding job. It is a deep, bone-weary mental exhaustion. It is the result of your brain constantly running a background program of worst-case scenarios, eating up all your mental bandwidth. You wake up tired because even when you sleep, your subconscious is doing terrifying math equations about bills and unexpected expenses. We need to look at the hidden reality of this problem, because it is not what you think it is. You are not bad at math. You do not lack basic intelligence. You are not inherently lazy or financially irresponsible. What you are actually experiencing is an acute, deeply programmed biological response to perceived danger. You are fighting a war against your own survival instincts, and your instincts are winning. Think about how society usually talks about money. We talk about budgets, spreadsheets, and discipline. We read articles written by financial gurus who tell us to just stop buying lattes and everything will be fine. We act like human beings are perfectly rational, emotionless calculators who just need to input the right numbers to get the right outcome. But that is a complete fantasy. When it comes to survival, your brain does not care about your spreadsheet. Your brain cares about safety. And in the modern world, money is the ultimate survival tool. It has replaced the spear and the fire. Money is how you secure food, shelter, and warmth. To your primitive brain, a lack of money directly equals a lack of safety, which means death. So when you look at that bank account balance and feel that cold dread, you are not overreacting. Your brain is reacting exactly the same way it would if you were walking through the woods and suddenly heard the roar of a dangerous predator. Your sympathetic nervous system kicks into overdrive. Adrenaline floods your system. You are literally in fight or flight mode while sitting perfectly still in a company parking lot. This overwhelming fear creates a massive, dangerous distortion in how you perceive reality. It makes small inconveniences look like world-ending catastrophes. At the same time, it makes actual, logical solutions look incredibly risky. This is the exact reason why taking your money and locking it away in an investment account or a high-yield savings account feels terrifying. To a terrified brain, putting your money out of reach feels like throwing away your only weapon in the middle of a battle. And this is exactly why you end up panic spending at the store. When you are trapped in a state of high anxiety for days on end, your brain desperately seeks a pressure release valve. It cannot sustain that level of panic forever. It needs a quick hit of certainty. It needs to feel, even just for a fleeting moment, like it has some power over its environment. Buying that random $40 item you didn't need wasn't a failure of willpower. It was your brain executing a desperate emergency protocol to secure a temporary drop of dopamine. It was a completely misguided but understandable attempt to self-soothe a nervous system that was on fire. You were buying a momentary illusion of control in a world that feels completely uncontrollable. The great tragedy is that this survival mechanism actually keeps you in danger. By hoarding cash where it loses value, avoiding proper saving systems, and constantly draining your resources just to regulate your emotions, you are guaranteeing that the fear will never actually leave. You are feeding the monster just enough to keep it alive, ensuring that you will have to face it again next Friday. But the first real step to beating this invisible monster is simply shining a light on it and seeing it for what it is. You have to realize that you are not fighting your bank account, and you are definitely not fighting a lack of discipline. You are fighting your own biology. And once you understand how that biology works, you can start building a system that finally turns it off. Let us look at the actual numbers for a second. Every single year, the Federal Reserve releases a report on the economic well-being of households. The headline statistic is always terrifying. Roughly 40% of adults in the United States cannot comfortably cover an unexpected $400 emergency using cash. They would have to use a credit card, borrow from family, or sell something just to survive a minor inconvenience. Think about how small $400 actually is. That is one trip to the mechanic. That is a single medical bill after insurance. Yet, for nearly half the population, that incredibly mundane life event is enough to cause a total financial catastrophe. Traditional financial media loves to point fingers at this. They claim people are just spending too much on coffee and daily subscriptions. But when nearly half of the entire population is failing at the exact same game, it is mathematically impossible for the problem to be individual laziness. You do not get a 40% failure rate unless the game itself is rigged. The truth is that the modern economic machine is built on keeping you in a state of mild, constant fear. The system does not actually want you to feel secure. A financially secure person is a terrible consumer. A person with a thick cushion of cash does not panic by random things on a Tuesday night just to feel a sense of control. A secure person pauses before they purchase. They delay gratification because their nervous system is calm and they are not looking for an escape. A stressed, exhausted, financially terrified person is the absolute perfect target. The entire ecosystem of advertising relies on you feeling like you are lacking something. You are living in an environment engineered by experts to separate you from your money. Think about how completely frictionless spending has become. You can buy anything you want with a single double tap on a glowing screen. The money disappears instantly. There is no physical cash leaving your hand, meaning there is zero psychological pain of paying. Now compare that to the process of saving. It is full of friction. It requires navigating confusing banking apps and scary financial jargon. It requires taking money you feel you desperately need today and locking it away in an invisible account for the future. The path of least resistance is always to spend. This is not an accident. Corporations spend billions tracking your behavior and your daily habits. They know exactly when you are most vulnerable. They know when you are exhausted from work and desperate for a quick hit of dopamine just to make it through the evening. You are fighting a war armed with nothing but a tired brain, while the other side has supercomputers and armies of behavioral psychologists. Willpower was never going to be enough to win this fight. This is why you need to completely let go of the shame you are carrying around your finances right now. The shame is a massive trap. When you feel ashamed about your money, you hide from it. You stop checking your balances. You put your head in the sand. Shame keeps you paralyzed by convincing you that you are fundamentally broken, and therefore completely incapable of fixing the situation you are in. Once you realize you are just a normal human, reacting predictably to a hostile environment, that shame starts to melt away. You stop blaming yourself for falling into custom-built traps. You start realizing that the only way to beat a relentless, automated system of consumption is to build your own relentless, automated system of protection. Here's what most people don't realize. The human brain is a brilliant prediction machine, but it is built for an environment that no longer exists. For tens of thousands of years, humans survived by hoarding resources and staying hypervigilant to immediate threats. Tomorrow was never a guarantee. So your ancestors prioritized what they could eat, hold, or hide today. Fast forward to the modern era, and those exact same survival instincts are actively sabotaging your financial future. Psychologists call this loss aversion. It is a cognitive bias that means the psychological pain of losing something is twice as powerful as the joy of gaining something of equal value. When you leave all your cash sitting in your checking account, you are not being greedy. You are subconsciously trying to avoid the intense emotional pain of losing immediate access to your resources. To your primitive brain, moving money into an untouchable retirement account feels exactly like throwing food into a river. This gets even worse when you understand how the brain handles the concept of time. Functional MRI scans show that when people are asked to think about their future selves, the brain lights up in the exact same area it uses to think about complete strangers. Your brain literally cannot connect your current identity to the person you will be in 30 years. So, when an expert tells you to save for retirement, your deep subconscious thinks you are being asked to give away your precious survival resources to someone you do not even know. Because your brain views saving as a dangerous loss, the mere act of trying to save triggers intense internal resistance. Overcoming this biological roadblock requires a massive amount of cognitive effort. We usually call this effort willpower. But willpower is not a magical character trait that you either have or do not have. Willpower is a heavily finite resource, much like a battery on your smartphone that steadily drains throughout the day. Think about a typical Tuesday in your life. You wake up to a blaring alarm. You have to decide what to wear, navigate frustrating traffic, manage a demanding boss, and juggle a dozen minor crises before lunch. Every single choice you make, no matter how small, burns a little bit of that cognitive battery. By 5 o'clock in the evening, your mental battery is blinking red and completely dead. Psychologists call this state decision fatigue. When you are suffering from decision fatigue, your brain actively goes into survival mode. and looks for the easiest possible shortcuts. It completely abandons complex, long-term reasoning. Instead, it defaults to whatever action requires the absolute minimum amount of effort while providing the maximum amount of immediate comfort. This biological reality is exactly where the modern economy traps you. Those massive corporations we talked about earlier understand decision fatigue better than anyone else on the planet. They have designed their entire business models around the exact moment your mental battery dies. They employ thousands of engineers to remove every single hurdle, delay, or second thought between your tired mind and their checkout page. They call this frictionless spending, and it is the quiet killer of modern wealth. When your phone remembers your credit card number, your shipping address, and your size preferences, you do not even have to think. You just tap a button while lying in bed. Because the physical pain of handing over paper money is completely missing, your tired brain never registers the transaction as a loss of resources. It only registers the immediate, soothing rush of a dopamine hit. Meanwhile, doing the responsible thing with your money is loaded with terrible, exhausting friction. To move money into a savings or investment account, you usually have to remember a complex password, log into a clunky banking portal, navigate a confusing user interface, and manually type in a number to transfer. It requires multiple steps of active, deliberate thought. Your exhausted, fear-driven brain is never going to voluntarily choose the high-friction path of saving over the zero-friction path of spending at the end of a long, stressful day. It is a biological mismatch. You cannot outsmart millions of years of evolution with a few sticky notes and good intentions. If you want to finally break this cycle, you have to stop relying on willpower and start building a machine that does the fighting for you. The only way to win a rigged game is to stop playing by its rules. If willpower is a draining battery, and your environment is designed to exhaust you, the solution is to remove your active decision-making from the process entirely. You have to build an automated machine that protects you from your own biology. I call the first, most crucial component of this machine the Amygdala Soother. Let us talk about your amygdala for just a second. It is a tiny, almond-shaped cluster deep inside your brain that is primarily responsible for processing fear and triggering your survival instincts. When you look at your primary checking account and feel that sudden wave of panic and tightness in your chest, that is your amygdala pulling the biological fire alarm. It thinks you are about to starve. Most people try to quiet this relentless alarm by keeping a massive, unorganized cushion of cash sitting right there in their daily checking account. They mistakenly believe that having all of their money visible in one giant pile will somehow make them feel secure. But in reality, this strategy accomplishes the exact opposite. It keeps the alarm ringing 24 hours a day. Think about it logically. When your rent money, your daily grocery money, your utility bill money, and your emergency survival money are all swimming together in the exact same bucket, your brain is terrified. It knows that one impulsive swipe of your debit card at the store could accidentally eat into your survival resources. Because the money is completely unprotected, you never actually feel safe. To truly soothe that biological alarm, you need to build a digital fortress. This brings us to the very first practical step of your new system. You are going to open a high-yield savings account, but there is a massive catch. It must be at a completely different financial institution than the bank you use for your daily life. It cannot be connected in any easy, convenient way. This separation is a completely non-negotiable rule. If you open a savings account at your current bank, it will show up on your phone right next to your checking account. When you get stressed or feel a sudden urge to panic spend, you can just swipe your thumb on the screen and instantly transfer the money back. That is a zero-friction environment, and it defeats the entire purpose of the fortress. By opening this new account at an entirely separate, online-only bank, you are intentionally building a massive wall of friction between your daily habits and your survival fund. And here is the secret to making it work. Once the account is open, you absolutely do not install their banking app on your smartphone. You do not put their website on your bookmarks bar. You do not carry their debit card in your physical wallet. You want this money to be incredibly annoying and tedious to access. If you have a legitimate, terrifying emergency, like a broken arm or a completely destroyed car transmission, you can easily log in on a computer and wait the 2 business days it takes to transfer the funds. But if you just want to buy a new television because you had a terrible Tuesday at the office, That 2-day delay will stop your impulse dead in its tracks. Now comes the absolute most important part of this entire machine: the automation. You can never ever rely on yourself to manually log into a website and transfer money into this fortress every time you get paid. If you wait until the end of the month to see what is left over, your fear and your decision fatigue will always talk you out of doing it. You will always find an excuse to keep the money close. You have to set up an automatic recurring transfer that triggers on the exact same day your paycheck hits your regular checking account. If your company pays you on the 1st and the 15th of the month, you schedule the automatic transfer for the 1st and the 15th. You program it to happen at 3 o'clock in the morning while you are fast asleep. When you wake up on payday and check your phone, the money is already gone. It is safely locked away behind the wall. You did not have to make a choice. You did not have to burn a single percentage point of your cognitive battery to make it happen. You completely removed the terrified, exhausted human hand from the steering wheel. Over the next a few months of running this automated system, something truly incredible begins to happen. Your amygdala finally registers that a dedicated stockpile of resources actually exists, and more importantly, that it is completely protected from your daily whims. The baseline level of panic in your chest slowly begins to fade, replaced by a quiet, steady confidence. Now that you have built a wall around your basic survival fund, you have to tackle the absolute hardest part of the equation. Getting that Amygdala Soother in place is a massive victory for your nervous system, but it only solves half of the problem. Cash sitting in a savings account, even a high-yield one, is slowly being eaten alive by inflation over decades. To actually secure your future, you have to invest, and that introduces a whole new level of psychological terror. If locking money in a savings account feels like throwing away your only weapon, putting money into the stock market feels like walking directly into a burning building. Your brain is hardwired to seek certainty, but the market is a landscape of chaos. It goes up, it goes down, and financial news channels constantly scream about impending doom. It is a completely hostile environment for an anxious mind trying to find stability. When you look at an investment account and see that your balance dropped on a random Tuesday, your primitive brain does not understand macroeconomic trends. It does not understand that the market always recovers over a long enough timeline. It just sees that you have fewer resources today than you did yesterday. It feels exactly like a physical wound, and your immediate instinct is to stop the bleeding by pulling all your money out. In a complete panic. This is why the traditional advice of just investing what you have left over at the end of the month is a complete disaster. It requires you to manually log in, look at the scary numbers, fight your own survival instincts, and willingly hand over your cash to a system you do not entirely trust. It requires an impossible amount of daily willpower. You will inevitably find a reason not to do it, telling yourself you will just wait until things look safer. To bypass this completely, you have to build the second component of your machine. I call this the Blindfolded Wealth Engine. The concept is incredibly simple, but psychologically profound. You cannot react to what you cannot see, and you cannot panic about money you never realized you had in the first place. You are going to intentionally blindfold your own fear. You need to set up an investment account. Ideally, something incredibly boring and stable like a broad market index fund, or a target date retirement fund. You do not want an account where you are picking individual stocks, because that turns investing into a chaotic casino game that will only spike your anxiety. You want a single, massive basket of companies that grows quietly in the background over decades. Once that account is open, you apply the exact same ruthless automation you used for your savings. You set up a recurring transfer from your primary checking account straight into this investment fund. This transfer must happen on the exact day you get paid, before you ever wake up. The money must be pulled out of your account while you are completely unconscious. Your brain cannot feel loss aversion for something it never actually possessed, because the money was swept away before you could mentally claim it as yours. You never feel the psychological pain of losing it. By the time you pour your morning coffee and look at your banking app, the cash is already gone. You simply adjust your daily lifestyle to whatever number is left on the screen. This entirely eliminates the crippling weight of decision fatigue. You never have to stare at a financial website and wonder if today is a good day to buy. You never have to wrestle with your conscience at the end of the month, choosing between buying a nice dinner or funding your retirement. The machine makes the correct, logical choice for you, ruthlessly and consistently, without ever asking for your permission. Think of it like setting the thermostat in your house. When you are cold, you do not manually chop wood and build a fire in the living room every single hour. You just program the thermostat to a comfortable temperature and let the machine do the heavy lifting behind the scenes. Your wealth is now being built on autopilot, completely immune to your bad days, your impulsive moments, and your primitive survival instincts. Let's talk about the math for a second, because the numbers tell a story that your nervous system completely ignores. When you're operating out of fear, your brain convinces you that doing nothing is the safest possible choice. It tells you that keeping your cash in a regular checking account protects it from harm. But doing nothing is actually an active financial decision, and it's mathematically the most dangerous choice you can make. Imagine you've managed to scrape together $10,000. You worked incredibly hard for it. You stayed late at the office, and you finally built up a cushion. Because you're terrified of losing it, you leave it sitting in your standard checking account at your local bank. Every single day, you log in, look at the screen, and feel a tiny sense of relief, seeing that exact $10,000 number staring back at you. But while you're sleeping, an invisible thief called inflation is quietly breaking into that account. Inflation is the gradual increase in the price of everyday goods. It means that a gallon of milk, a tank of gas, and a month of rent cost slightly more this year than they did last year. Your bank account balance might not change, but the actual real-world power of that money is constantly shrinking. If we look at historical averages, inflation hovers around 3% every single year. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower, but it's always eating away at your cash. If you leave that $10,000 sitting and checking for 10 years, the number on the screen will still say 10,000, but in terms of what it can actually buy, it'll feel like less than $7,000. You literally lost over 30% of your hard-earned wealth by trying to keep it perfectly safe. Your fear tricked you into guaranteeing a massive financial loss. You didn't protect your money at all. You just locked it in a room and let it slowly starve to death. That's the devastating math of doing nothing. Now, let's look at what happens when you use the Blindfolded Wealth Engine instead. Imagine you take just $300 a month. That's $10 a day, roughly the cost of a drive-through lunch or a couple of coffees. Instead of leaving it in checking to be eaten by inflation or panic spent at a big box store, you automate it into a broad market index fund. Over the last century, despite wars, recessions, and global panics, the stock market has returned an average of roughly 10% per year. But just to be incredibly conservative, let's assume your automated investments only grow at a modest 8%. You set up the transfer, you close your eyes, and you let the machine run in the background of your life. For the first few years, it feels a little slow. You check the balance occasionally, and it's growing. But it doesn't feel life-changing. But fast forward 10 years. You've automatically contributed $36,000 of your own money, completely without thinking about it. But because of compound interest, your account balance is actually sitting at over $54,000. That extra $18,000 is entirely free money. It's the reward you get for automating your system and removing your fearful brain from the equation. But compound interest is a snowball rolling down a very long hill, and the true magic happens when you give it more time. Let's fast forward 30 years into the future. After 3 decades of this invisible $300 monthly transfer, you've put in a total of $108,000 of your own money. But your account is now worth over $440,000. You generated $250,000 in pure, untouched profit simply because you set up a digital machine on a random Tuesday and walked away. That's how compound interest fundamentally alters the trajectory of your life. It isn't just your money making money. It's the money your money made, going out and making even more money. It becomes an invisible army working for you, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, entirely immune to decision fatigue or bad days at the office. The contrast is absolutely undeniable. The person who hoards cash because they're terrified of the future is mathematically guaranteeing that they'll stay poor. They're fighting a losing battle against inflation every single day. But the person who builds an automated, frictionless system guarantees their own wealth, completely bypassing their human flaws to let the math do the heavy lifting. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what if my car actually does blow up? What if I really do need every single penny just to survive the month? I completely hear you. That is the fear talking. And in the world we live in today, it is a very valid fear. When you are living paycheck to paycheck, the idea of locking money away behind a digital wall or sending it off to a blindfolded wealth engine feels physically impossible. You feel like you are walking a tightrope without a net, and I am asking you to voluntarily throw away your balancing pole. But here is the harsh truth you have to confront. If things are so incredibly tight that a single $20 transfer would break your entire life, you are already falling off the tightrope. You are just waiting to hit the ground. The illusion of safety you feel by keeping that money in your checking account is a complete lie. You cannot wait for the perfect, stress-free moment to start protecting yourself, because that perfect moment simply does not exist. The economy is never going to magically pause to let you catch your breath. Your fear is telling you to just wait until you get a promotion or until you finally pay off that one credit card. But human nature guarantees that your lifestyle expenses will always rise to meet your income unless you build the friction first. If you get a raise tomorrow, but your biological system is still broken, your brain will just find new, slightly more expensive ways to panic spend. You will just end up with nicer things sitting in your passenger seat while you feel the exact same suffocating dread in the company parking lot. You cannot out-earn a broken psychological framework. So you have to start right now, exactly where you are, with whatever tiny amount of money you can manage. You are not trying to build a massive retirement fortune by tomorrow morning. You are simply trying to prove to your biological alarm system that a new, safer pattern is actually possible. This brings me to your 24-hour challenge. I am not asking you to overhaul your entire financial life today. I am not asking you to invest thousands of dollars or read a dense, boring textbook on index funds. I am asking you to execute one single, microscopic action to break the paralysis of the last few years. You just need to take the very first step to starve the fear. Within the next 24 hours, I want you to go online and find a high-yield savings account at a bank you have absolutely no current relationship with. Do not overthink this step. Do not spend 3 hours comparing interest rates down to the exact decimal point. Just pick a large, reputable online bank and spend the 5 minutes it takes to fill out the basic application. Once the account is open, link it to your primary checking account. Then, I want you to set up an automatic, recurring transfer of exactly $5. Schedule it to happen the day after your next paycheck hits. $5 is absolutely nothing. It is less than a single fast food meal. It is less than the impulse purchases you make when you are stressed out at the grocery store. It will not change your standard of living in any noticeable way, but it will fundamentally change your psychological wiring. When you set this up, do not download the app for this new bank onto your phone. Do not carry their debit card. Just let the digital machine quietly pull that $5 into the dark on payday. When you wake up and see that the money is gone, your brain will brace for an impact that never comes. You will go about your week, you will pay your rent, buy your groceries, and live your life. And your primitive brain will slowly realize that the world did not end. You survived the loss. You did not starve because you hid $5 from yourself. That tiny realization is the exact spark that burns down the massive monster of financial anxiety. Once you realize you can survive without that $5, you can eventually change the automated transfer to $20, then $50, then $100. You will slowly dial up the thermostat on your wealth engine while your brain remains completely calm. You will systematically starve your fear and feed your security, one automated transfer at a time. Look, here's the truth about what we're actually building here. When you strip away all the financial jargon, the spreadsheets, and the complex investment theory, money is ultimately just a proxy for human energy and time. But when you're trapped in a cycle of survival and fear, money becomes a master that dictates your every emotional state. It tells you when you're allowed to be happy, and it tells you when you need to be terrified. The people who eventually break free from this cycle don't have superhuman willpower. They aren't intrinsically smarter or harder working than you are. The only difference is that they recognize their own biological limitations. They understood that a human brain, exhausted by modern life, couldn't be trusted to make perfect financial decisions at the end of a long day. So they outsourced the discipline to a machine. We've been taught, by society, that wealth is loud. We think it looks like luxury cars, massive houses, and designer clothes. But the kind of wealth you're building with this automated system is incredibly quiet. It's invisible. True wealth is simply the absence of that tightening feeling in your chest when you look at your banking app on a Friday afternoon. Wealth is the ability to sit at the dinner table with your family and actually hear what they're saying, because your brain is no longer running terrifying math equations in the background. Wealth is the luxury of not knowing what day payday actually is, because your automated system has already allocated the funds before you even woke up. It's the peace of mind that comes from knowing the impact of a disaster will be absorbed by your system, not your nervous system. Think back to that very first scene in the company parking lot. I want you to picture yourself sitting in that exact same car. Maybe a year or two from now. The engine is off. The week is over. You pull out your phone and open to your banking app. The numbers on the screen look entirely different now, but more importantly, you feel entirely different. Your heart rate is completely steady. Your breathing is slow and calm. You know that behind the scenes, without you lifting a single finger, your Amygdala Soother is fully stocked and standing guard. You know that your Blindfolded Wealth Engine just quietly bought another slice of the global economy while you were drinking your morning coffee. The machine is running perfectly. You put the car in drive and leave the parking lot. You might still pull into the drive-thru of an expensive coffee shop, or you might stop at a big box store. But the motivation has completely shifted. You aren't buying a $40 item just to feel a fleeting sense of control over your chaotic life. You already have control. If you buy something, you buy it simply because it brings you genuine joy. And if you walk out of the store completely empty-handed, you feel a deep, quiet satisfaction. You're no longer a victim of frictionless spending because you've built a frictionless fortress of your own. You finally stopped fighting a war against your own survival instincts and started working with them. You deserve to live a life where your mental bandwidth is spent on creating, loving, and experiencing the world, not panicking about how to survive it. The digital machine we talked about today is your ticket out of the survival loop. It takes time. It takes a little bit of setup. But the profound psychological freedom it buys you is worth more than any number in a bank account. So, I want to leave you with a question to think about today. If you woke up tomorrow morning and the fear of money was completely and permanently gone from your life, what's the very first thing you'd do with your mental energy? Let me know your answer down in the comments, because declaring what you want is the first step to actually getting it. Until next time, keep building your systems, protect your peace of mind, and let the machine do the heavy lifting for you.